Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. I'm just laughing to myself because I'm 3 minutes late, you guys. I have been such on a good roll lately. If you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, I have been on the norm for the most part of my life, a bit of a procrastinator, right? And this comes from my childhood. We grow up sometimes in these dynamic families that put us on edge, that we never know what's going on from one moment to the next. We never know who the ally is and who the enemy is. And it's in that cautiousness and in that sometimes not wanting, and you know I'm big on putting one foot in front of another, but it's hard sometimes, when you're a highly sensitive, when you're empathic, when you're hypervigilant, when you are codependent. Sometimes it really, 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 really is very, very difficult to get yourself moving. But that comes specifically from trauma. And I would have to say, I'm going to say it's only been maybe a half a dozen months or so where my consistency has gotten increasingly better day to day. And it's something I've been quite proud of because it's not my nature, because I'm naturally a procrastinator. Because who likes the unknown? Who likes to step into the unknown? That's why we like the comfy. That's why we like the couch and the remote control. That's why we try really hard not to rock the boat, right? Where we don't want that pot stirred. It is one of the side effects. But if you do that work, if you're just putting that one foot in front of another, just doing those little baby steps, right? With what you're comfortable in the moment. And I started out in what I really enjoyed, my hobbies, my interests. And I just made that consistency a part of that, stepping into the unknown, but because it was fun and exciting, that's the word, exciting, I looked forward to it. It wasn't something that I was afraid of. And then slowly we introduce those things that we are afraid of, right? Like being consistent, in feeling like the fool, that everybody's going to see us fall flat on our faces, that somebody is going to say no, right? That was a big one for me too, right? And it takes time. It really does take time. I have been at this now for, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine how many years I have been at this now. But I didn't start anywhere less or more than where somebody else, meaning you guys, right? And I was talking to a lady today, really lovely lady, right? And I was telling her, how important it is to understand that it's never too late. Never too late. It's just like being, now it's a bad analogy, but in the same token, it's a good one, right? Not having faith in your entire life and your being on your deathbed, and the priest comes in and says, would you like to confess? Would you like your last rites? And in that one moment, you say yes. And in your last few breaths of your life, right, you move towards something that will possibly, right? Possibly move you on to something else, that you gain faith in your very last breath. I don't know if that was a good analogy, but you don't get better or much closer to it's never too late than in that moment, do you? And, I keep in mind that I am not perfect, that I have lots of things that have a little bit of that timid understanding in my system, that naturally, right, I am a coach and a remote control kind of girl. I had to throw my TV away, right? Because I couldn't control myself. That if I had a TV, I wouldn't have been able to get as far as I have, as I feel I have, right? If I had immersed myself in television shows that only entertain me. And it's not that I'm not entertained, but I entertain my things or entertain myself in my interests, in my passions, in my hobbies, and in those things that I understand that I've got to get there, right? But, right, it's not going to be yesterday. It's not going to be tomorrow. We said it yesterday. Might not even be in this lifetime, but doing the very best that I can, right? Putting one foot in front of another. And it worked, you guys. Like, I'm doing things, right? And I'm expressing things that I never thought that I would. I never thought I would. I never thought I would have the courage to do that. I never thought I would have the confidence to believe that somebody else out there would believe what I had to bring to the table, right? I never thought that I could be consistent. And, sometimes it's just in being consistent, in promising that you're going to show up, right? You might not be early. You might not even be on time, but you're going to show up. And that's the way that I did it, right? Just in those little spoonfuls, one foot in front of another. And I made so much progress that I think, you know, moving forward, that it's going to be a lot better. Anything was better than where I was coming from, right? And that's not true to say, because there's a lot of people out there in worse states than I could ever imagine to be in, right? And some of these people are holding on, right? They're grabbing at strings. I grabbed at those strings, those lifelines that just dropped down, right? And knowing maybe they might not have been through kindnesses of others, that there might be a little expectation on another person's side. But in that moment, because it was going to save my bum, I said, I got no choice. I'm taking that lifeline, right? And that is on me. But there are lessons in that. And if you can take the lessons in that and say, oh my goodness, I did that. And what a horrible feeling, right? Because now you're beholden to something or someone else. You've let yourself down. You know you did something that you didn't need to do. You did it out of desperation. Maybe you did it to get yourself out of a bind, right? Maybe you did it because it was gonna move you forward, maybe move you past somebody else, right? That it made it so that you could step on somebody else's life, somebody else's head to get where you wanted to go. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, that that's on you. There's no making up for that, right? You can do 100 kindnesses for people, but that one unkindness is still there, right? And I am not, what am I going to say to this? I am equally a participant in this. You know, I relied on my friends and my family to help get me out of binds when I was a gambling addict. And I got myself into binds constantly, almost every single day, because I gambled every day. And when I wasn't able to bail myself out, right, because I had dug that hole so deep that I had already retired all of my resources, that I relied on those lifelines that came down that made me feel so bad, right? Because that was on me. I had never should have gotten myself in that situation. And if I hadn't gotten in that situation, I wouldn't have taken those lifelines that possibly might have put the milk on somebody else's cereal, right? Or put somebody in a position that they had something on me, over me, that I was now beholden to them, that I found that I had become a servant to make up, right? We should try to make up our wrongs if that person or, right, that event is somehow repairable, right? But it's only repairable, it's not being able to put it back into the state that it was when it was new, when it was fresh, when it was offered, right? And I took advantage. I took advantage of that, and there's no making up for that. And in that same token, it doesn't make me any less beholden. And these characters in my life, right? They feel that I owe that way. And yes, but sometimes when you get yourself in that situation and you have nothing, you have zero, how do you repair? Right? And what I had done is I had enslaved myself and made myself, because my sister Tracy bailed me out so many times, that I made myself her servant, her housekeeper, her cook, her confidant, right? But I have to say, we were good friends in that. We had company with each other in that support, because we both supported each other, right? In our miseries. That was part of the deal. But in making those baby steps and putting one foot in front of another and being able to understand where I made my mistakes, that I found I had to pull myself away from those roles that kept me stuck. And it doesn't make these characters feel that I'm any less beholden to them, because they still did drop those lifelines to me. But I can't go backwards. I can only go forwards, and I'm putting one foot in front of another. I'm not going backwards. Part of the journey is going backwards on occasion, right? It's that idea of putting 2 steps forward and going backwards 3 steps. But if you're just keeping that momentum and that consistency, right? And being persistent in what you do, that you can realize that eventually you're consistently looking back at an old life. You're not falling back into the old life, but you're looking back there as a spectator. And it can make you feel bad because when you do that, you're leaving people who, right, helped you out, right, got you out of those binds, who presented kindness and partnership to you. But it's in this idea that we have to change, right? We have to change. And lots of people, right, in their fear, in that stubbornness, in that unknown, they have a difficult time in putting one foot in front of another, right? That they can't find that consistency, right, for themselves. And it doesn't matter how small the steps are, right? They'll never be able to catch up, right? And so we're leaving people behind. And we talked about this yesterday too, about that guilt in doing that. But the idea is, and it just came to my mind now, right? We're not supposed to look backwards. It's like Gomorrah, right? That you just have to leave it behind. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year or next lifetime, but eventually, right? Maybe somebody will meet you in some crossroads that they will be able to catch up. But we're in different stages of our evolution, and we make it so that it's really hard for ourselves and for others to let go of the old in the pursuit of something new, in something better. And this is why I say just put one foot in front of another. Those baby steps, right? Those little baby spoonfuls of food, just little bits, what you can manage to get down and to digest. Hello, Tammy. How's your night going? That if that is all you can do, then that's all you can do because you're only expected to move forward. You don't have to go 100 miles an hour, right? There are people in their makeup that it becomes natural, right? And even in being a procrastinator myself, I'm managing to come to the forefront. But I'll never be, right, a Tony Robbins or a Elon Musk, like not in this lifetime. I said not in this lifetime because I'm on that roll, right? I understand and I have these lessons and these tools along my tool belt now that really compound this idea of it's just about moving forward. That's good to hear, Tammy. I went for a walk today. I was actually supposed to go for a bike ride today, but we had 90-kilometer an hour winds today. We're actually in the midst. I thought there was a big fire going on, right? Or that the wind, but what it was is the wind is bringing up all the dry dirt and dust, and it's just blowing it into the air. I can't even see downtown. There is so much dust in the air. I got everything locked down. I put up a set of curtains over my window for summer, right, to help keep that the work off of the air conditioner that it could stay cool in here. But yeah, it was a beautiful walk. It blew me like I'm walking and it was pushing me along the sidewalk, like just pushing me, right? And if I had gotten on my bike, that wind would have just tipped me right over. So today was not a bike ride day, but I made a point. I went out today. I was out probably for about 3 hours this afternoon. but it was really nice. And it was in being consistent and saying, okay, I'm not going for a bike ride, but I compromised, knowing that I had to make a connection. I had to get outside, and I held myself accountable to that, right? That's that self parenting that makes it possible for me to put one foot in front of another. I have to be my own cheerleader. I have to be my own parent, right? I have to set the rules down for myself, right? I do. I'm kind about it. And there are rewards and treats along the way. I picked up some fig Newtons. I don't know if you know what fig Newtons are, Tammy, if they have them in the States, but they're little cookies. They're almost like cookies, but they got date mash inside of them, and they're really really good, and they're really good for you actually. If you're going to have a treat, they're probably about the healthiest treat that you could get in the cookie section at the very least. So I picked up some fig Newtons today, and they were amazing. I really enjoyed them. But yeah, that's the idea, when I'm coming in here, like I have to be genuine in what I bring to the table. I have to make sure, because somebody might be coming in for the very first time and getting introduced to me for the very first time, and they might think that, I've been at this for a long time, right? That it was easy, right? That I am consistent, that I'm right. Well, they probably don't think they probably don't think that. Thank you if you do, I but it's that idea that we represent ourselves in a way that we can be the example for each other, that we can just do things in the capacity that we can manage. And how I started out, like I said when I came in today, it's that idea of starting in your interests and in your hobbies, and trying to put in some consistency. Every time you start feeling comfortable in what you're doing, go, okay, this isn't bad. This doesn't seem so difficult. I've got the hang of this now. Wow, this is pretty easy. Wow. When you start thinking like that, now it's time to do the hairy scary, right? Not the terrible hairy scary, but it's to stretch yourself a little bit more, right? Because you're not supposed to feel comfortable all the time. That's the process of learning. That's the process of succeeding in anything that you do, anything that you want to achieve. Because, right, nothing worth getting is just going to be handed to you, right? It isn't, unless you're going to hit the lottery, you buy a lottery ticket and you hit it. But how many lottery tickets did you buy in order to hit that $1 million? $1 million worth of lottery tickets? Did you just come out even, and then you just splurged that money because you didn't pick up any skills along the way? You were aiming every time you bought a lottery ticket, you were aiming to hit the big one, but were you preparing to hit the big one? Were you making a list of how you want to utilize that money, how you wanted to divvy it out, how you wanted to invest it, how you wanted to save it, how you wanted to pass it down? Probably not, right? You hit the big one and you go, oh my goodness, vacation. Oh my goodness, like let's buy a boat, let's buy a mansion, right? But it's the idea of being prepared, right, for that success, right? you shoot. We had this word dreams yesterday, right? Dreams are goals that are just not yet realized. And if you realize that they are goals for the future, right? You go ahead and dream, but you've got to put that action in it. You got to prepare for that. You've got to put in the reps, right? You've got to get the lessons in. And you're not going to hit the lottery. Tomorrow's probably, like I said, you're probably going to buy 1,000,000 lottery tickets before you ever even hit a small lottery, right? But when you do, and if you have put those reps in, if you have gotten those tools around your tool belt, that you'll be able to better manage how you're going to utilize that $1,000,000. That's just an analogy. I only use that because, I have goals, I have dreams, and I have to keep them in the forefront. This is my worksheet with all my notes and camping sites and the provincial parks that I want to do in this year's trip. I go in there and I fine tune it and I change it up. For my retirement, I have this dream of right, having an RV and living in provincial parks, right, connecting with Mother Nature and making my YouTube videos and really truly mixing it up in exploring the inside and the outside and expanding what I'm doing. But it only happens because I am putting those one step in front of another, right? And like I said, it might not happen for me that way today, tomorrow, next year. But at some point, if I keep it to the forefront and if I keep putting that action, right, into those dreams that I have, right? You can't just lay on the couch and dream of these things. It's just not how it works. We said yesterday, right? God helps those who help themselves, right? And, I was a dreamer. I was a dreamer my entire life. I was that coach in the remote control kind of girl because in my experience, I did not want to move. I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want people to get angry with me. I didn't want anyone to say no. And what better way to do it is to not put you in that situation. So this conversation all comes from that fact that I was 3 minutes late today. And I have to say, I have been pretty consistent at making sure that I'm coming in right on time. I used to be here like 5 minutes before, but more than likely it was 5 minutes after, right? Today, I only didn't come on time is because last night my laptop updated and I didn't turn my laptop on today because I was out and about. So when I was ready to go live to set it up, there was a little bit of a little bit of time. Well, it was, what do you call that? Not updating because it had already optimizing. It was optimizing, right? So it wouldn't let me come in live. So I had to wait until that was all done. But I thought, oh my goodness, Cindy, you were doing so good. You were so bang on time for the longest time, right? And I was congratulating myself, and that's my movement forward. But we do fail, don't we? And we do every once in a while go a little bit backwards. But we're not looking back there. It's just a momentary thing now. And we get back on track because we recognize it now. We don't go, oh, well, it is what it is, right? You go, oh my goodness, Sydney, you were doing so good, right? You're going to do better tomorrow. Uh, oh, you do know what figs are. Yeah, very windy here, very windy. Yeah, I've only taken my bike out twice now. Twice now. The weather is just not accommodating. We're not even going to get a spring this year, you guys. We went straight from winter to summer, right? Straight from winter to summer. But, right, it is, you know, in adapting to what that one thing that we have no control over. We still haven't figured out how to predict and control the weather, right? We control and we discover and utilize so many technologies and science and medicine and even in the weather, right? We are getting better at predicting the tsunamis, right? We have technology that lets us know where in the world the earthquakes are happening. We know when the meteors are getting close to Earth, but but oh, and I guess in the Middle East they're seeding the clouds and they can make it rain in places where there is no rain. I don't know where what the technology is in that, but that was something that I read along the way. But for the most part, we don't have a grip on Mother Nature. Today was just supposed to be cloudy, and I went to the grocery store and it was raining, and then the sun came out. And then I says, okay, you can't go bike riding because you went to the store and you almost got blown over onto the street. There's no way you can ride a bike. It'll be lots of work, number one, right? It's hard to ride a bike against the wind. But what if that wind pushes you over? And it is a new bike that I'm still getting used to. But I said, go for a walk, Cindy's, right? It was still warm outside. It was just very, very windy. And then I went for my walk. What happened? It started raining. It started raining again. And then it was so dusty in the sky. I thought there was a fire somewhere in the city. I stopped off when I bumped into somebody I knew and we talked about it for a minute or two, and he thought that there was a fire somewheres too. We were trying to figure out where the fire was because it was so windy. We were kind of, predicting where the wind was blowing, and we still couldn't figure out where that fire was. But then when I came home, I googled a little bit what was going on, why we couldn't see out in the sky, and it was because they're dust clouds. It's coming from the farm fields, it's coming from the streets not being cleaned because over the course of the winter we salt our roads so there's not a lot of car accidents. If you don't know, I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and we had some very cold days here in Winnipeg this past winter, right? It's minus 40s actually with the wind chill. It was it was a pretty cold winter this year, but we managed to get through without a spring. But we managed to get through, and we're looking forward to summer. Um, I think this next coming week. We've got a couple of cooler days coming up only because we're expecting some rain. So things are going to cool down a little bit. We need that rain. We need to clean the city up a little bit, even though they have been working on the streets and stuff. There's still, the trees are covered in dirt and sand and dust from the winter, and they need a good soaking. The buds are all there, ready to bloom into leaves. I look out my window every day. I went to my little seedling across the street today, and I didn't at first see the buds on the tree, and I went, "Oh my goodness! I hope it made it through the winter because it was its first winter out on the boulevard, right?" And it's a pretty busy street that I live on, so it got beaten up pretty good with the snow plows and stuff. I kept a half eye on it, but there's nothing really I could do about it, right? The snowdrifts were like up to the top of this little tree, and I didn't know whether or not it would manage to get through. But when I got up close and I really took a good inspection of this little tree, sure enough, it's got little buds on it. Not a lot of buds, but that you don't need a lot of buds. It's just a seedling. It'll do much better next year, right? I'm just happy that it survived its first winter. You were right on the seeding, Cindy. I've read and studied a lot through the years about HARP and DARPA and CERN. Is that what it's called? I'm going to write that down, Tammy, and then after my live show, I will check that. I will check that out. That's great that they can do that, but those are countries that have lots of money and that have the resources to do these things, right? But, I'm thinking if we could utilize these in some of those countries that do have a difficult time in bringing about good agriculture and clean water for the people who live there, right? So that would be pretty amazing if they can do some charity work in that. Um, um, there's an organization called Charity Water. I don't know if you've ever heard about them, and they dig wells for villages all over the world. Not just wells, but they'll do dams and irrigation, and they utilize their donations, and they get lots of donations. I think he was a big rock star or something at some point. The guy who started this charity, it's called Charity Water, and they bring water, right, to people who don't have water. I think it's absolutely amazing. There's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff going on in this world, and you know, we focus on what's not going good. It's one of the reasons I got rid of the TV, so I wouldn't be um, focusing on the tragedies and the bad news and those headlines that would, right, that 6 o'clock news. There was no good news, no feel good news on that. It was one of the reasons I named my, right, what's my good cheer. And at first I thought, I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to shine on people and bring good cheer into my lives. And then the next thing I know, because it's in that putting one foot in front of another, because I didn't know where I was heading with that. I just had that, and that's what I had to work with. So I moved with it, and it was in putting one foot in front of another, right? That I'm doing what I'm doing now. And I'm so grateful for that, right? And that was a gift, right? And it turned out not just to be a gift for myself, but if I get it right, it will be a gift for others, right? And that's what's so amazing. Thank you for letting me know about that. I'm going to do a little bit of research. It was just an article that I had come across, and but it seems that you know about it more than I do. So thank you for giving me that information, and I'm gonna check it out after my live show tonight. There are wildfires too already this spring in the U.S. and in some of the states. This is going to be a pretty killer summer when it comes to heat. I know year before last, there were a lot of forest fires in North America. This year we have El Nino, and it's going to make for a very high temperature summer and fall. So we might have a very late fall uh, this year. Uh, I go on my trips in September because I love the colors of fall, right? And I remember that year that we had all the fires, I wasn't even too sure whether or not I was going to take my trip because they were shutting down parks. A lot of the provincial parks weren't even open because they were such high risk of forest fires. And in fact, my favorite provincial park in Manitoba, which is called Nopaming Provincial Park, it was devastated, and It's not the first time that that park has been devastated by fire, and yeah, this summer is going to be it's going to be interesting. But again, we don't right. We're not very good at predicting the weather, and who's to say? It's all a lot of hearsay. It's research. Yes, there's a lot of research and looking into it and analytics and variances and stuff. But I think for the most part, right? Just like today, it was just supposed to be cloudy and it rained quite a bit today. Okay. But yeah, I hope the wildfires are not too bad, you know. Uh, I would like to see it. I don't mind that we're not very good at calling out the weather, especially this year, right? Because they are very concerned about El Nino. They were saying that the glaciers in British Columbia and in Alberta, they are receding record at a record pace, and the ice breakup in Antarctica, right, is pretty incredible too. We are in the global warming. We've been in global warming for a very long time, and if you don't know, Antarctica used to be a tropical continent, right? But weathers change. Change is ever constant in this world. It's just not in us humans. It's in nature too. We just follow suit in that. Um, no, those HARP is a U.S. Department of the Military. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll find that. I'll find that out tonight after my live show. I'll do a little bit of research myself on that. That's neat that you have those kind of interests, right? But that's the idea, to just delve into your interests, right? Be able to make that little bit of movement for yourself, putting that one foot in front of another, and just what comes across your path, what catches your attention, right? Where your curiosity takes you. And then next thing you know, you're doing shadow work. And, it's not fun, but if you're doing it in baby steps, it's not scary either. And a lot of people make it seem very difficult. But you know what? If you can resolve a lot of those understandings that you picked up along the way in your childhood, your teenage years, your young adulthood, trauma doesn't happen just in your childhood. That's complex trauma. But there's other traumas, the paramedics get them, the police officers, the firemen, you know. It's not my place to say, Tammy, but there's somebody on our other live channel who was actually in 9/11 when that went on. And, it's trauma happens to everybody. And, because we wear this mask, we never know who these people are for the most part, because they just suck it in. They just, this happened to me. I don't want to bother people with my problems. And then what that does is it causes so many problems. I am a big believer in crying, talking, and just letting time take care of the healing, right? But you have to get it out of your system. You have to get it out of your system. I'm so grateful that I had this platform, and it helped me out so much in pulling me out on some of those coping mechanisms, because I didn't recognize that I had traumatic issues from my childhood. Like, you know, lots of people out there have crappy childhoods. Lots of people, right, don't have perfect upbringings. Lots of people do. What makes me any different than anybody else? Nothing. It's just that I was willing to recognize it. I was willing to just put one foot in front of another. I was willing to look back at my childhood, not just to do the blame game, right? Because we can all do that. Right? We could all be resentful. We can all hold a grudge, but we have to understand we have to put ourselves in those shoes as children because those experiences happened to us when we were children with childish minds without those understandings that we have now as adults. But if you can go back there and put yourself in, those characters' shoes, but as the person that you are now, you might see things a little bit differently. I did, right? I have a little bit more compassion for some of those characters who really messed me up, right? At the same time, I was able to put myself into some shoes that made me recognize that sometimes it's not the person who's actually putting the action in. Sometimes there are people behind the scenes that are, right, puppeteering things that make things move the way that they move and there what was that law, the 26th law, um, and it's an actual law, and that law is to keep your hands clean. So that's when you utilize others to do the dirty work, utilize others to make it so that nothing reflects negatively back at you. And when you're a child, you just see the goodness in things. And if it's not hurting you, you just automatically assume that that is something that is absolutely good for you, right? And if you recognize that it wasn't good for you, you would have pulled away from that. But as children, right, you don't get that opportunity because you're under guardianship. As adults, right, we carry on these ideas of trusting people who don't show their cards, right? I love genuineness. I'm listening to the wind, they're blowing, I can hear it. I had my window open just for a few minutes because it was so windy. I love to hear the wild, crazy weather, right? It's exciting for me, crazy weather. But I knew that if I left my window open more than 5 minutes, my house would be covered in dust and I would have to dust everything tomorrow. I might do a little bit of dust work tomorrow anyway. But but yeah, we get amazing different weather here all over the world. We do, right? But again, we don't have much say in it, and it's strange when you actually think about it, right? That we don't have any control over Mother Nature. Mother Nature still does what it wants to do. We're still chasing tornadoes, right? We get a better idea where they might touch down, but still we don't have them down pat. But at some point, maybe we will, and we won't lose lives, right? We won't lose lives in that because we have a better handle on, at the very least, understanding how the weather works, right? Right now, we're just taking wild guesses, right? It's like a pin in a what haystack, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, Eugene's here. Hello, Eugene. I hope your night is going good. Thank you for popping in and hanging out with us. I went back into my life. It was after my live show yesterday. I had a lot to do. I didn't have my live show until after 10 o'clock at night, and then I had to come in. I had to do my thumbnail, and then I had to rewatch my live. I had to do some messaging, and then there was another content creator that I wanted to sit in on his lesson, and it was like almost 1 o'clock in the morning. And I can't stay up that late anymore. I used to be such a night owl, you know. I'd stay up till 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and then sleep all day till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I would get up and I would start my day. I was fairly nocturnal. I had a lot of nighttime jobs. I worked bars and nightclubs when I didn't get home until 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes I would just stay up just to send my husband off to work. Sometimes I would just lay on the couch, right? Being that person, lay on the couch with the remote control and just watch old black and white movies. Oh my goodness. I haven't watched a movie in so long. I used to just love the old black and white and the musicals. I used to love the old musicals. They were amazing. Yeah, maybe I should. I've got a few movies here somewhere. So I don't know where they are. I haven't looked for them in a while, but I do have some movies here. Maybe tomorrow. I could say maybe tomorrow. I know I won't. Right? I'm I love working online, so this is where my entertainment is, right? Funny that I was able to be part of this age of AI learning. I'm not technically inclined, not even close. But if you compare me to other people in my generation, right? I'm pretty techie, I think, right? And it's pretty cool that I'm actually working in social media, that I'm actually building this career at my age, right? It's never too late. Just putting one foot in front of another, right? One foot in front of another. And yeah, I'm working in emotions, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty interesting. And even though, right, it's not fun sometimes, that it's once you get comfortable, then you know that you got to stretch yourself and make yourself uncomfortable again. But I don't know, maybe at some point it gets a little bit easier. For me, no, right? Every time you get super comfortable, something big lands in my lap that I have to digest, that I have to accept, and then I have to work with it, delve into it a little bit until I'm feeling comfortable with it again. And then what happens? Something else drops into your life. But what is that called? That's called life, right? That's called life. That's called moving forward, right? That's one step in front of another, right? That's never too late. Okay. A little bit, but it's good to be busy too, right? I like to keep myself busy, but there are days too where I'm just sitting here, like, you know, uh, this afternoon. If I hadn't gone out for my walk, I was pretty bagged, and I could have easily just zonked out. But it's about staying active. It's about doing what you have to do. It's about being accountable to yourself, at the very least, just being consistent. Maybe not on time, but being consistent in what you do from day to day, right? And not the same stuff, different stuff, changing it up. Because if you don't make that change, something else will come in and stir that pot for you in order to get you going. You know that just as well as I do. I love the black and white movies too, and those old black and white TV shows too. Oh man, I used to love like Lucille Ball. That was such a great show, and that was it. Started off in black and white, but color came to the TVs. I think halfway through that series, but there were a lot of good television show. Mr. Ed, that was a good one too. The Talking Horse. Yeah, lots of good shows, right? But times change, interests change, right? We change. if we're doing it right, right? I could have been, right? At 16 years old, I was on the couch, not with a remote control. They didn't have remote controls when I was 18 years old. I think that was a little bit later. But I was laying on the couch watching TVs. And I very well, without making the choices that I did, without following my intuition, without putting one foot in front of another, without paying attention to my surroundings and in my relationships and asking myself those questions and following my curiosity, I might still easily be on the couch with the remote control, right? And that's the truth because I am that person who's just naturally a procrastinator, and it's something that's very common with people who have right complex trauma, who grow up in dynamic families, people who do have trauma, people who do have depression and anxiety because we don't want our lives, we don't want our days to days to be any different than the day it was yesterday, right? Because that makes it so that we're unfamiliar that with our surroundings, with our experience, and we want to know from minute to minute what's going on. That's called control, isn't it? And sometimes we got to let go of that control, right? The imperfect, perfect. Yeah, yeah. That's me. Okay, you guys, let's get into a word. 54 powerful words. If you've never hung out with us before, I just go in, I grab a card. Sometimes it's pertinent to the conversation. Today, it wasn't much of a conversation. My walk really pooped me out today, but maybe I'll come up with something amazing tomorrow. Usually, I take my day off at work day on Fridays where we keep it light. Maybe I'll come up with a good topic of discussion tomorrow. Okay, that word we have today is grace. Grace swoops in to make the impossible possible. That moment when we're ready to give up, that moment when we just can't take one step forward, we can't take one more brain cell going off, we can't deal with one more wrench thrown into our lives, we can't deal with not knowing, and we just can't move, right? And when I talk about, if we don't make that movement for ourselves, that something or someone will come in and do it for us, will throw that wrench in. And it's not necessarily always, right? It's a good thing in the end, right? But it's always better if we help ourselves, right? That we make that movement ourselves. We just take those baby steps and put one foot in front of another and make that movement for ourselves. Because if we don't do that, right? And grace does swoop in and make that impossible possible, you might be getting a 360-degree turn in your life and find yourself right at the beginning, or maybe you'll get a 180-degree turn, which you will be on the total opposite end of where you are in the moment. And if that's the case, that is very scary because that's somewhere you've not been before, right? It's always better if you can do those little steps yourself. Give yourself those little 45-degree turns, right? Just knowing if you don't put that work in, right, that God is going to help you, right? Because you couldn't help yourself. And there's going to be a big swooping change in your life, right? It's a fresh start. It's something new. It's a readjustment. It's getting you back in the place where you're supposed to be, right? So if you're sitting on the couch with the remote control and you've been doing that for 40 years, right? And you really want some change in your life, but you're not making that movement yourself, something's going to come in, something's going to swoop in and make that impossible possible, because it's impossible, because you're just dreaming. You're just wishing and dreaming for what you want, and you're not making that movement, right? And if you really want something, right, what you think about is realized. And if you're not realizing it, if you're not making that movement towards that, something's going to come in and make that impossible possible. And who likes the 360s and the 180s? That's why I just keep moving forward, one step in front of another. I'm not going 100 miles an hour, right? I'm not even perfectly consistent, but I am accountable to myself, right? And yeah, I can imagine, right? Because it's scary. Those 360s can make you want to give up if you're that person who doesn't like change, if you're that person who likes the couch and the remote control, and you get that crank in your life, you get that wrench you in your engine, you get that hairy scary, you get that redirection, that is going to do something to your system. And some of us do work best. I got so many of those turns in my life, believe me, right? And I always prided myself on adapting and conquering, right? Riding the waves. But can you imagine what that does to the system, what it does to your emotions and your mindset when you have to do that in the moment, right? In the moment, the first thing that came to my mind, right, is the tsunamis that I was talking about earlier. Very strange. Well, I did watch a documentary on this week, so it kind of makes sense that it might pop into my mind, right? But if you don't prepare for that, if you don't if you don't stabilize your houses, get yourself to higher ground, right? Like, you're going to ride those waves. You're going to adapt and conquer in the moment. You're going to do whatever it takes in that moment to make sure that you survive that situation, because grace has swooped in the last minute and said, here it comes, right? But if you had that preparedness, if you'd done that little bit of work, if you had put one foot in front of the other, if you had made an escape plan, right? You might have been in a better situation, right? Might have been in a better situation. That's not a very good analogy, but that's what came to my mind. So we're going to run with that, you guys. Okay, that's my good cheer. We kept it light tonight. I will be back tomorrow, right? I will delve tomorrow. Maybe we'll have a good topic of conversation, right? Just keep it light tonight. Dust is in the air. Okay, you guys, have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.